Okay, so we have a beautiful owl here, beautiful barn owl. We've got some tawny owl, haven't we? And on the other one, there's all sorts of fabulous positions and things like that. So I'm going to pop a bit of a background on this one. I am actually going to try and pop some of this on, but I'm going to make it quite loose, focus a little bit more on the bird because there's a lot to fit in, if we're doing this over 2 hours. So lots of opportunity to practice loads of new things. So what I'm going to say, three things I would say to focus on today, because we could focus on probably 10 if we let ourselves. So just have a think about these three things while we're painting owls, which are just stunning. So one of them is thinking about the different tones within white feathers. And we'll come back to that and I'll just talk about this as we go. But actually, once we start to really use the power of our observation and looking, we'll start to look in and look within these feathers and see that actually they're not as white as we think they are in patches. So when we start to look like some of the shady areas, you might think, oh, actually, there's a bit of a blue tone or a bit of a purpley tone, or I've even got a bit of a pink tone. So what we're going to look at is how we can use tints really effectively so that when we do put those really bright whites on, that it creates this lovely kind of a 3D effect. And also how we can use some warmth throughout these feather areas as well. So when we've got some kind of yellowy tints and things like that in there and some ochre colours, it's how we can kind of, drop those in because the warmth will also create the shape of the owl as well, help to create that. And without the warmth, sometimes we get quite a flat picture if we've just got darks and light. So that's one. So we're looking at the tones of the different feathers within the white areas to the warms and the cools. And so that's one. The second one is how we can also use shadow to create depth within here. So how we can look at the areas that are really quite a darker shadow within and also the other shadowy areas and how we compare how dark the darkest ones and then others that are slightly a bit lighter. But when we start to look around the bird and see like some of create, there's a big depth behind where the feathers are on the face here. And also when we start to look, we'll see that there's real dark areas of depth where we'd expect to where there's a deep shadow because there is a kind of a deep area behind there under the wing, between the legs, because obviously we've got a tail feather coming over the back. So that will really help to create this sense that we have got this, the depth in the bird, that contrast between light and dark. So that's the second. And then the third thing is how we can use directional brush marks to create, the feel of the feathers and the patterns and things like that, which again is a gorgeous one to have a go at with just kind of getting everything, just really enjoying kind of mark making. So again, have your bit of paper if you can, free, so that you can actually just test some of the colours and the tones until you're happy with what you've got. Okay. So just maps that. Those are the three things I'd say. If you can take three things from the session, even though there's lots of other things going on, then that will really help. If there's some really, really helpful things in there to really create the shape of this lovely, lovely owl. So I'm just going to fold this in a moment. I have drawn this quarter grid. I'm still using it even with that folded over. Just where is my? There it is. Just get my. I've just folded it in so you can see the edge of my picture actually. Just get that put up down for you. So what I'm doing with this grid is when you've got things like birds, it is quite or animals even, it's quite helpful to because what often people say, oh no, the head's too small or the legs are too short or I'm not quite got this wing long enough. And this actually does really help to kind of decide where everything's going because what we can do is take each quarter in isolation and kind of start to fit together each part of the owl. So we're going to do that and have a go. So again, the drawing part is really just sketching out whereabouts we're going to kind of put each part of the composition of the bird. So it's not really important because we will go over it. We'll probably widen over some, and those edges will disappear of the pencil. So don't worry about it being perfect. We're not trying to do a perfect drawing at all. We're just laying it out on the page. So again, I'm sticking with obviously that where this grid is. I'm just wondering if I can make that a bit darker for you, actually. Let's see. I've got another pen. Can't quite see that right. So as you can see that, I think we can see that okay, can't we? Right, and that one's here. So we've got obviously most of the head and part of the, the top of the wing here, and like the feathers that go underneath, where the neck is actually of the owl, come in this top quarter, which is really, that's why I think it's really quite helpful to be able to see that. And then we've got the post at the bottom. Now, actually, I am going to put some of this post in as well, so that I start with the top bit and kind of try and fit everything proportionally into this quarter that goes in there, and then we can carry on some of the other bits. But then it's also useful to have a mark of where the bottom of the legs come to as well, so that we're on the right lines as we're moving things around. So I'm actually going to pop that in. It doesn't matter if you start the bird first and pop this in afterwards. So all I'm looking at here is, how far out this comes. So I often use, within each quarter, I often use kind of a halfway mark as well to help proportionally get things out. And if we look, this post here comes about halfway. So again, we know whereabouts that's going to start, which is quite helpful. If we we probably can get 4 of those in about, but again, this is an approximate mark. So I'm looking to put this about a quarter of the way up here within this quarter itself. Just helps us a little bit, really, kind of work out how much of the bird takes up there. And then we know that this section here, it just comes into this little edge, doesn't it, really? So that's quite helpful again. So we've got some really helpful points to mark things up. So I know that this comes across here. If you're wanting to get the angle, you can hold a pencil or a brush or even a ruler up. It's entirely up to you. And we're going to just take the general angle. I can do it like that with a paintbrush and just try to draw with the rubber then. That's not too helpful. There we go. So yeah, so it's just we're just kind of fact checking that the angles are kind of all on the right lines. But as I said, we end up changing them sometimes anyway. And then this here, if we look at this from a flat position, I'm just with the edge of this paper. So we're looking at that's straight across. And so when we're looking here, is it straight across the page or is it slightly angled? Well, it might just be ever so slightly angled up. So I am just using a ruler just so it's easy. So I'm kind of bringing that's flat. We know it's up here, so it needs to come up a bit further up. So I'm going to bring that further up. And I might just angle it ever so slightly up there. And then again, whatever you use, whether it's a pencil or a brush, whatever, there we go, just fact checking that. So we've got a general idea. We know that that's more or less in the right place, and also it's kind of the right angle as well before we start. And it's just as simple as that, 3 lines. And all these are just a series of shapes that we're breaking down. So I'd go back to the head then, so we know we're kind of going to fit the rest of this body and feet in there. So we don't kind of start here and work down and go, oh no, the feet have got down below this line and we can't fit the box in. So at least you've got that in as well. So when we're looking here, again, if you take this quarter here and we're looking about halfway between, we're looking at where that halfway mark is, look. We know that halfway, the owl's out here, the owl's head, where it's at its widest here, comes out to this position here, about halfway there. So we can have a look at whereabouts it starts. So it starts a little bit further down, doesn't it? And again, we can change it. So I'm kind of making this quite sketchy. I'm looking at the shape of the head on the top. I'm not thinking about the feathers on the inside yet. We'll come to that. and then just starting to kind of bring that shape out. So quite rounded, and it comes all the way around there. And again, I might need to adapt my line slightly to get that in. Comes right, almost right there, doesn't it? And then it just comes round to the edge. And then this side, I'm going to bring a bit flatter on this side. And then it curves round, doesn't it, to the top. Okay. So within that then, when you're comfortable, you've got the head coming as far as it should do. So again, if you're not sure, just have a little look. And that's kind of just about under 1/3, I'd say. So 1, 2, that's your bottom third, and it comes, the top of the wing is just under about 1/3 of the way down. So that helps us know where to start this part of the wing from. And again, we can look at how far this kind of needs to come down as well. But if we're looking, you know, that's halfway into this quarter, just over a quarter of the way down. But it's ever so helpful in you know, in looking, using a kind of a way of doing it. So I'm not going to put too much detail on the wing there, because I'll come back to that, because I want to come back now I know the head's more or less in the right position and everything. I've got it where I want to. So bring this part of the head down a little bit further before I start this out here. Make sure that's long enough there. And then I'm going to come in and actually just check that this comes. So this part where the feathers come here, and again, I'm not going to put too much detail on, just enough. We're looking at that nice, it's quite square, isn't it, at the bottom? So again, we're looking at how this fits within the outside shape that we've got, because owls are just a series of shapes like everything else really, and they're really nice to paint because of that, actually, and their feathers are very directional. I'm just bringing this up. So again, we'll look at how flat the side here is. There. There we go. And then we look at the top too. We've also got this heart shape, haven't we? But again, it's quite square across. So if we're not sure, we can always kind of just bring it across and make it a little bit square on the out, you know, the way around on the out here. And again, as I said, we can alter this. So this isn't going to be what it finishes up like, because we'll end up moving things around. But we're just getting that kind of dinner plate shape. I don't know if it's a dinner plate really, but there you go. And then I'm just going to come back and map in the rest of the bird, then come back to the eyes and nose, because that is the bit that always people will say, oh gosh, I'm not doing the eyes because it will ruin it. So I always say, let's do those bits first. And anyway, the face is a great place to start, because it really will help us to work outwards from the eyes with all of that different brushwork and the colours and tones. So it's really great to do that. So I know we're going to put the background on, but because this is a block shape, we can still just kind of get that block in place and bring in this green. If we're not altogether sure how far it's going to come in, we'll just bring it in a bit further and then paint the feathers back over the edge. Absolutely fine. So what we've got here, we've got this bit of the feathers here, and where this is there, it comes back out, kind of back out under the wing, doesn't it? But the straight bit comes straight down here. Obviously not totally straight, but a little bit. And then we've got this bit of the wing that comes down a bit further there. And then again, if we go halfway on this quarter here, there, we can see that's whereabouts the leg, you know, will start to come in as well. But there's this extra little bit of feather too. So if I pop a little halfway mark on here, just so we can see, we've got this bit of the leg which comes down, the back of the wing, I think actually, comes in and comes down a little bit. Have a little look. Actually, I need to move that in a little bit, because I've just noticed what I've done. I've not put it, it's kind of on the edge of here, isn't it? So I'm bringing that in a little bit further. It does curve in like that. Right, and then we've just got the other side as well, because we can fill in all of these details as we go, like the shape of the wing and those kinds of details. And then on here, this side, we've got all of these edges of the wings which come into the next section as well. So if you want to kind of make a marker of where the neck is, and kind of all this lovely feathery you know, chest of the owl, which is just really nice there, look. We can pop all that in. There we go. Just popping a little marking, not doing too much more than that. And then just having a look at where these lovely wings are here. Part of the head that comes out, and then we've got this forewing that comes in halfway across, and then we've got the top of the other wing as well. We can get both of those in. So we're bringing that through, look. And round. And then we can bring that over. Over here. And again, you know, sometimes we end up shifting things in. Again, that's absolutely fine if we do. It's just a preliminary kind of sketch there. And then we've got this wing that's like obviously broke into separate, the forewing and then the hind wing as well. So we can just get those in. And if you're not sure about which direction it's coming, just look at how it crosses over the two parts of this grid here. So again, I think we've looked at how far that comes. So it's just kind of a quarter of the way down there. So we can even just pop a little mark to help yourself there. It's just over a quarter of the way. We get it in there. And then we've got all these other parts of the wing. But again, you can pop these in much more detail as we go. You don't need to do it necessarily now unless you really want to kind of do that. And then we've got this rest of the wing coming down here, and we've only got this section here that crosses over. It comes round. And if you want to go down the back of the wing and then get the tail in as well, that's absolutely fine there. So I'm having a look here. I'm going to get the feet in because they come from near halfway and they come round. So it crosses over a little bit, but they come round here, don't they? And then we have the leg that goes up there and then more or less in the middle, and then we've got part of the other foot here. So that just helps us get a little bit into place, doesn't it? Maybe just. And then we can see where that other leg comes now, because this is the behind, you know, the back of the wing there. So that's helpful as well. We can just see a bit of a foot, and they're really furry. They look just beautiful with all the feathers. So we're just starting to get a few things in there, and then we can see where this kind of wing crosses over and comes all the way down. So we want the rest in, curling round. Part of it comes around the back here, and some of it comes out and down the back of here. Can you see that there? So I'll need to kind of draw that back over the top so it overlaps a little bit. So we've got this part of the wing here, and again, as I said, we end up trying to change in some of it. We've got this wing overlapping, coming inwards there, and then we have another part here, and then the rest of this wing which goes round there, and then all we can see then is the back of the wing in there. So we're starting to really kind of get lots of this owl into place now. I made the legs a little bit tall there, but I'll just go over that with a bit of white. And so there we have it. And then this is the one that people get most worried about, but actually owls have got lovely shaped eyes, quite round, aren't they? If you look at those, they're almost like marbles, except for a little bit of a point. So everything we do, if you look at it as a shape, makes it much, much easier to do. And then we've got this lovely nose. If you wanted to look at the triangle section here and you felt more comfortable popping in where you can see this triangle coming to either side. I mean, the other thing is you can go down the center of the head if you want. It's looking slightly to the side. You can go like that and just look at where, you know, that kind of line would come up. We've got the markings there and then there as well. You can do it that way if you prefer. But I'm going to look at, obviously, they're a bit near to they come a bit nearer to the outside of the head, but they are quite nice and round. So I'm going to pop these eyes in and comes up, and we're just following the shape. We get almost a little bit of, you know, of the corner of the eye here coming over. It's almost a bit like the eyelid there, isn't it? And then really kind of rounded the rest of it there. And again, things like the eyes, we can just, you know, we can do a little bit more once we come to do it. You know, you can change the shape and say, oh, actually, it should have been this shape, or it should have been this shape. So that's one of them. And then the other shape here, we've got another one there. Again, you know, we're looking at the inner eye, the shape of the inner eye. And then again, we're bringing this over the top. And then we're bringing this up and round. Now, some of this won't really, it'll look more like it once we, that needs to come outwards, once we start to actually paint them in, but we're just kind of getting them into place really, so we're not worrying about it. That's the biggest purpose of getting them down. And with the acrylics anyway, it's going to take a while before we start to really see the shapes and things of this. So don't worry, because we'll have all of those feathers and things to put into place as well. So don't worry what they look like at the moment till we get the actual paint into place. And then we've got the beak, which is quite long and thin, isn't it? And it kind of makes that lovely shape. But again, we can pop that proper shape back in there with it. A bit of a shadow underneath it. We have all sorts of feathers overlapping and everything. And even this feathered on the face where the beautiful feathers are, we'll overlap those, because with the acrylics, one of the things that we will start to think about when we're doing it is we'll start to have to decide what we're going to put on first of all. Okay, so I'm just going to take a little pause there and then see how you're doing with that. Okay, so when we've got, you know, some idea, we've got some of those feathers and things like that mapped out, we can really start to have a think about. So if you don't want to put a background on, that's absolutely fine. Or if you just want a really plain background, that's fine as well. I am going to demo putting a little bit of a background on, because I know some people might like to see how that goes. So I'm just looking at the colours in there. And it's quite out of focus. That's, I think, the point of it actually. When you photograph in close up, you do tend to get this, and so it's quite nice to actually represent that the background is a bit out of focus as well. So I would go with, and again, this is trying out any colour that you want to use. You don't even have to go for green, you can go for anything. So I'm just popping on here, what's say some brown again, I've got some dark brown on here. This is my background, and I'm going to test some colours out and things as well. Water might be helpful, actually, getting that out of the way. And I'm going to pop a bit of a yellow colour on there, and I'm going to put a little bit of white on as well, just to have a go at mixing up some colours. So let's see. Just pop a white on. There we go. I'm going to put plenty of white. I'm going to use quite a bit of that in a bit anyway. And I'm going to pop a bit of yellow. Now, it doesn't really matter which yellow you put on. You can put a lighter yellow, you can put a warm yellow, but I'm just going to do that just to give a slight variation, because over here, it's a little bit more mossy green there. So I may even add a small amount. I'm going to use this in the owl anyway. So this is Venetian red, but it's a similar colour to burnt sienna is a great colour for owls, and lots of natural warm browns. It's great colour. So anything like that, or you could even use a bit of yellow ochre. I'm just demonstrating with kind of minimal colours, really, just to show you what you can actually do with, you know, mixing them and everything. But yeah, yellow ochre is a great colour as well, to kind of pop into the background a little bit. So what I'm going to do is the same as I did last week, because I want to keep this kind of a bit blended, this background. So I'm going to mix it up. And again, it depends on the temperature of the room that you're working in. I'm not in a really hot room, to be fair. So it should stay a bit less less warm. So you can use a little, use a palette knife to mix it up if you want to, or you can just use a small, a small paintbrush, just bring bits in. So I'm going to start with getting my dark colour mixed up. So I'm going to go in for just some kind of sap green. But again, not everybody, and I'm just going to add a small amount of dark brown to it because it's quite overpowering. So I know if I add loads in, it will just turn it dark, really dark. So it's giving me that kind of quite dark mossy. But again, you might not want it to be too dark. So don't, if you definitely know you want to go really dark, that's fine, but you can always build it up, the colour. So again, let's just give it a test. Have a really good experiment tonight and really get stuck in with all the colours. See what you think. I'll go with a bit more dark in there. And I'm not going to put any of these berries on until last because that comes over the top. The berries are over the top of this background. That'll be after I've done my owl, to decide how much of it I actually want to put in as well. Because sometimes when we've got, something like a bird in there, we actually change a little bit what we want. So now I know that I'm probably okay with that colour. Yeah. I'm just going to add a tiny bit of water in there so it does move nice and freely on the page. Gathering it up as well. Right, so that's the dark one. I'm just making sure it's really out all between the bristles, because if we're trying to get a lighter, sometimes we drop it in and it can change it. So I'm going to go for more of it's kind of a midi green really. It's a bit patchy over here, but it's over here it gets lighter. I'm going to use this green for the lighter area. I'm going to go in with a small amount of this yellow. I'm going to use my yellow for other colours anyway. So I want to get this kind of a colour on the top. But that's quite acidic. Sometimes when we add a yellow to sap green, it makes it quite bright. And I'm not after a really bright, I'm after a mossy. So I'm just going to drop in a really tiny bit of this warm reddy brown here. And that should take it to make it a bit more mossy colour.
Becky, can I ask you a question when I'm doing pastels? How do I mix my colours as I'm doing pastels?
Okay, so yeah, so was just adding a little bit of this red. Still adding it. I'm adding it really small bits at a time though, because it can be quite overpowering. There we go. Right, so it's starting to look a bit more mossy green now, isn't it? There we go. So I'm a bit happier with that. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's really stand out. I can still make that a little bit more yellowy. So I'm going to add a bit more yellow back in there, just so it's a bit brighter. We're just looking at those, finding the colour that's right. Okay, so I'm happy with those. And then the mid-tone, which is just the ordinary kind of green on there, I will just probably just add a small bit of this to it. Just use it more or less as it is, just a tiny bit of browning, and then start to get all of that whilst it's still wet. That's what we were doing last week, wasn't it? We were just kind of blending it in. Here we go. So I'm going in with a round brush today. So I'm going to go in with my darker areas first and get those in. And you can kind of dab them on where they're darker. You can pop it on nice and thickly as well. So again, experiment with how thickly you want to kind of pop some of these areas in. It's our artist impression of what we can see. We're not trying to create this photocopy or exact exact photograph because we've got a photograph. We don't really need that. Okay, so I'm just going to spread this out a bit. Actually, whilst I'm doing this, adding a tiny bit more because it's lighter than I thought it would come out. Even though it's come out darker on there, it hasn't on here, funnily enough. That does sometimes happen. So let's get that in. Now, you can see I've gone over the edge because I'm using a big brush. I'll just use a little smaller brush in a moment to bring that in. And again, kind of bringing in some of those dark elements where I can see them. There's not as many darker ones over here. Now, as you can see, because this is dark, it's still showing through at the minute. But we will get that nice diffused look with this. And then I'm just going to go in. And again, you know, when you're doing this, you might decide that you really liked some movement in there and you want to get some things moving. Get some nice swirls and things in, or you can just keep it really still. It's entirely up to you. So I'm going to go in now with some of these other colours, which is a mid-tone. I'm just going to pop some of those in now. Where I can see them over the top of here. One of these things as well, because if you put texture on and don't make it that really smooth. So last week I got these smooth skies and blended them in that way. But actually, when you've got texture, when you're looking close up, it feels quite intense. And it's only when you've got your work back, you know, away from you a couple of meters that it feels a little bit more like, oh, so you really just got to get used to looking at texture close up with acrylics, and the more you look at it like that, the more you get used to it, really. It can be quite a shock at first when you think, oh my gosh, it looks all kind of patchy, but that's, you know, from a further away, it's not quite the same. So I'm just going to go in now with this kind of lighter one. I'm actually going to add a tiny touch of a lighter white in there. Just put a tiny bit of a tint into that colour I was mixing. I'm going in with this here. With the tint. I'm going to wait until, like, I won't want to do any more to it until it's kind of dried off a little bit. So I'm still weaving a few little lighter bits through there. I am going to just drop in a couple of just a couple of darker areas now, actually. So I'll just get my other, darken off this a little bit. There we go, and I am actually just going to drop a tiny bit of a tint in there with a little bit of white. There we go. Okay, it's a little bit more the colour I was hoping for originally when I tested it. Sometimes happens. There we go. Right, so there we go. So now I am going to drop in just a little bit more of this because it wasn't quite as dark as I wanted it. This is a great bit about the experimentation. Don't feel that's it, you know, I can't do any more now because it's not turning out the way I want. Just go in and have a little go and a little play. And drop in some of these other colours that you want in there. But again, you know, it's quite diffused. Light is not quite as bright. Okay, that's it. That's all I'm going to kind of pop in for the moment. Dry my brush off. And focus a little bit more on the bird now. Let that dry. Sometimes as well, your background can get a little bit too, you know, it's got quite a lot on it, so you need to let it dry off a little bit anyway before you can, you know, you might want to go in. And also with a background, you're never quite sure until you've done the actual, you know, obviously the owl is our center point here, what you actually want that to look like, because it can change. So if in doubt, leave it and come back right at the end to it. So in terms of the owl, so what we were thinking about are those three things that I mentioned earlier that we want to focus on. So one of those is thinking about the different tones we have within this for the owl within the fur. And when we start to look, we can see there's all sorts of different colours. So you know, it's slightly, and again, you'll have to decide. This is what we do as an artist. Everybody just has a think. What kind of a tint is in here? What's mixed with the white? Now, is it pinky? Is it purpley? You can see. Is it bluey? And have a little look at what you can see. Then we've got these lovely kind of colour. You know, these gorgeous kind of toned down like burnt sienna colours or Venetian brown, whatever, Venetian red, whatever colour you want to call it. So we've got all that going on in there as well. So we'll, if we get our eyes in, get your finest brush. Now this is where I do use black when I'm doing birds or animals, because quite often, you know, some of the animals' noses, for example, are black. Some of the eyes are. I just try not to use it in some of my landscapes, really. So I'm just going in with a little bit. I'm going to get the finest brush I've got, and I tend to pop it on the top edge of the brush, just because you get a little bit more control. So if it's all way down, because acrylic, actually what sometimes happens with your brushes, they all gets really clogged and they fill out really quickly. So I'm just going to just kind of, you can always get it off your brush just by rolling it on the actual you know, rolling it on the palette just to get it off, and then just have enough on the top that you can kind of guide it round, and then just start to guide round, just pull round the tip. Then you can do the same with the bottom as well. You can turn your paper around as well if you don't want to kind of work downwards. Until you're happy with the shape. So my shapes changed a bit intentionally when I drew them. That's why it's good to have a little bit of a sketch, because then you think, actually, I think I need to adapt that slightly when you've done it, and it gives you a good kind of practice. And then the other eye as well. So and we're just using that top tip really just for a bit of control. If your eye isn't quite the shape you want it to be, that's okay, because what we can do when we're going in to put the other feathers and things in is we can straighten it out a little bit as well. So there's always lots of things we can do with the acrylic. There we go. So I'm going to stop there with that. So I've got, there's different colour, a lot of the blacks have got different names, like Mars black, ivory, it's not ivory actually, is it? Because that's not a dark colour. Anyway, yeah, or noir. Sometimes it is just black noir. So depending on the different brand, it will give it a different name. But it's dark. It's a dark colour. So then even within the eyes, then what we want to have a little look at is some of the features within the eye to make it more eye-like. Sometimes it can look very there's not much shape in there, so we can easily give shape to the eyes. If we have a little look and we spot it, to me, it feels a little bit like there's almost a bit of an eyelid around the outside of there. So I'm just going to go in with a bit of this Venetian red, but I'm not going to make it, I want it to be not too bright. So I'm just mixing a little bit up on my palette there. I've got some Venetian red up there. I want a small amount. I'm just going to put a little bit of normal brown, like darker brown in there, so not normal brown, a darker one. And then again on the tip, I'm just going to go where I think, kind of round the bottom on the inside. I'm just going to put that. A little bit of brown in there. You probably won't be able to see it on mine because mine is so tiny, but just enough because we can see it coming out the corner. That's fine. And then also a little bit of white where we get this little reflection in the eye here. So you can almost just pop it on the tip, just kind of copy that shape there that you can see. There's one over this side as well. And then there's a couple. If you're looking at this on a phone or an iPad or something, you can kind of scroll out. There's a couple of little tiny bits just on the edge as well. This one there. Okay. And then again, it will start to make more sense. I'm just going to darken this bit off because I've popped that brown into the centre here. This is what I was saying. If you make those marks a bit too bright or whatever, you can just kind of just make them less. So there we go. Right. So we've got some nice kind of feathery colours, haven't we, throughout near the outside. So I'm going to go in. So it's thinking about all of these feathery. I'm still working around the eyes because this is when I was saying it's great to start with the face. It really, really is, because you can just really work outwards from there. And then, because the feathers do go that way, they go outwards, don't they? From the eyes, or in all directions, outwards, bottom out, side out, top out, apart from, the nose in towards the nose. So you get these lovely patterns and things. So I'm just going to take a bit of this burnt sienna-y colour where I can see it kind of coming out from the side of the eyes there. I'm going to pop a tiny tint with a bit of white in there, just so it's not quite as intense, because it will create such a strong contrast. I don't quite want a strong contrast there. And then just start to pop in some of the colours that you can see. You can use some of the brush strokes as well if you want. And then we start to see it comes round the eye, and you're just observing these little patterns of colour and feathers, and just start to pop in. It's so absorbing. It's absolutely lovely to get hooked into here. And there's other colours in there as well. I'm just kind of making a start. This just helps us to see a little bit when we're not, when everything's kind of up in the air. We've only got there's quite a lot to do on the bird. It takes some time for it to take shape. It just gives a bit of confidence to be able to say, yes, I can see. feeling a bit more owl-like when I get these colours in. So we have that there. Okay. So you can pop in, if you want to, you can pop in the nose, the beak as well. So again, I'm just looking at the shade underneath the nose actually. So again, it feels, you know, can you see pink? Can you see purple? Just have an experiment. I'm going to get a little bit of pinky colour out, or you can put a bit of red with some white. I'm going to get some purpley colour. I'm going to get a bit of blue out as well. And again, this is where you can experiment with the different blues you've got in your kit, just for a tint. So I'm mixing a few different colours. So I'm going to go, I went a bit more pinky with this morning. I might even go just a tiny bit more blue based. I'm just taking a bit, this one's the Phthalo blue as we were talking about last week. I didn't actually use much of this, but so you hardly need any because obviously it's quite strong colour when you mix it with a tint. So we've been looking at just mixing some from there. So I'm just making slight variation in the tone. So it looks almost white. If I put this on here, it looks almost white. It's just slightly bluey. But when I put it up against the white, that will really pop because it's slight enough that there is a difference between it. Or you can try like a purpley mix if you want, a bit of that, a bit of a pinky purple there. Tiny amounts, again with some white, just to see. So that's the other option, you could do that. It's quite nice as well. And again, you know, make sure your water's nice and clean because at this point you don't want all the mud, you don't want it kind of muddying up with the water. So by all means, if you need to change your water, pop that in. You're working this in pastels. This is the, you know, you need to just lay down a colour and then work in over the top the brush stroke, the feather strokes. Whereas when we're using a paintbrush to do this, you can literally just start to kind of get those feather shapes in. So I'm just going to try that tone. I quite like that actually. So I'm just going to add some more green paper as well. Sure my brush is really soft. And again, depending on the size, I have got a tiny brush, but my piece of paper is really tiny. It's only about an probably about an A, just over an A6. It's not very big at all. So I've got a tiny brush, but you know, if you've got a bigger paper, you can go up a brush. I am going to go up slightly just to get these first ones on. Otherwise, I could be here a long time. We sometimes get hooked with this tiny brush, and then it's like, oh my goodness, it will take forever. So I'm just going to go in with these kind of colours that I can see around. And I'm going to come back to the beak actually. I'm going to come around and start to pop in. Now you won't see these in massive detail yet. What I'm doing is I'm just directionally popping in these feathers where I can see them. They kind of come off the side there. And I'm just kind of pulling the paint through. You can even put it on quite thickly if you want. And again, around the eyes here, around this area, just on the inside, we're getting these feathers are a little bit slightly different in tone. So I'm getting those in. Yeah, come all the way up here. Yeah. On the inside of the nose. So we're just looking all the time just at what the tones are that we can see. And we're going to just kind of work those in and build those up really. It's really fascinating, isn't it, when you start to really look into, you know, into them. And then I'm just looking at some of the other tones here. So this is really white, this feather, isn't it? Really bright white, these feathers here. And Some of the others are brighter, but then some of them, that's brighter, isn't it, here? But it's almost got a tiny bit of warmth to it as well. I don't know if you can see the same thing, but I'm just going to pop in, just mix a bit of white. I'm just going to try a tiny bit of yellow in there. And again, just needs to be marginal. We don't need to kind of make, I'm a little obsessed with that. Still needs to be dark and slightly more yellowy than the very brightest white. So I'm going to add a little bit more to it. So it's still very light, but we've just got this slightly warmer tone because it is a bit warmer there. There we go. And then again, and start to pop those tones in and how they come out on the owl. I'm overlapping as well a little bit because all these feathers on the inside, they overlap as they go out. You have a little look. I'm going to have to go down the side of the picture because it's such a small piece of paper. So again here, start to look around the eyes as well, where this goes up to, where it goes up to here. And again here, kind of popping in all the feathers, just kind of push them in the direction you can see them going in. Really nice, actually. You get really sucked into that. Yeah, overlay them. There we go. So we're just adding, just by doing that, just it's making some, creating some shape on the face. Okay. And then I'm just going to go in and just pop a few more of these colours back in there because they seem to have kind of disappeared a little bit. So I'm just going in with this nice kind of reddy brown and just feathering that up from the direction of the eye that I can see there. Sometimes we lose some of the shape when we put the other colours in, and that's fine. We can just pop it back in. Just here as well. There's lots of this colour as we come up here as well. I'm going to not focus too much. I'm going to get the head in behind it really. And then here I can see quite a bit that comes up to the eye and then it goes over the top. And we get these lovely, lovely feathery warm tones in there. Just each of these little things that we're doing is just building up the bird and the shape and everything. And then having a little look at where you want to pop your beak. So it may well be that you want to pop in, there's a little bit of dark shadow, isn't there, just behind it. That helps sometimes. We can see it then, creates the shape. There we go. And then just having a little look at the colours in there. And again, if you've gone over and you think I want to pop that back in a little bit, the blues and things. And that's a bit wet actually. That's a bit, you know, if you working small and it's a bit damp, just give it a little bit of a blot off with a bit of tissue. And you can just kind of lighten it. And then pop your really light bit back in the middle as well, because there's quite a light bit, isn't there, in the middle there. So all we're doing is we're layering up, putting the lightest on last. Okay. And these shapes just all of a sudden start to make sense to us. That makes sense to our brain as well. So then, you know, when you have a little look what we've got round here, we've got this really bright bit. But I'm not going to put these feathers on until I've actually got the colours behind. And that'll feel a bit strange to start with. just because they overlap. So when we're thinking about layering up these colours, what we need to think about is how do they, what comes first and then what overlaps. If we draw that in first, we'll then have to go over these feathers to get the background in. So we're best kind of getting the back feathers, the back of the head and everything, and all those colours, and then bringing that lovely, the face feathers over the top of what we've done. So again, we're just looking at the different colours in the owl. Now, can you see, does it feel purpley? There's all sorts going in here. Sometimes it's thinking, what colour do I actually put in there first? So I'm going to put, you could use a nice yellow ochre colour or something. If you don't have yellow ochre, you can go in with a yellow and a white. And then the tiniest touch of a dark brown. Tiny. And that's what I'm going to go in with for this side. I'm just going to work these feathers over here. I might actually just put a little bit more yellow and white in. And again, you can actually start building these up quite, you know, as you put these feathers and things in over the top more thickly. And we're just starting to kind of get the shape of this in, and it's just giving us a base really. We just need a base coat to start with. We can bring that over the background as well, so it feels, it's quite, you know, it's quite a firm, it's a firmish line, but we've still got, we can make it a bit better if we want to. We're just starting somewhere with it. I'm going to do the same over here and then layer up some of that colour afterwards. We're just having a good look what we can see there. And then, you know, once we get the kind of the beardy like effect on there, then that'll feel a bit more, not, you know, it'll feel a bit more as it should be. Just bringing it round, the different shades round, and we can work into that and over it. Really, really lovely, isn't it? Looking at, you know, all the different shapes and things in here, it's beautiful. And then we've got some on the top as well. So I'm just going to pop a bit of a layer on there, on the top. This is coming round over where this these feathers are going to come. And then I'm looking at the colours and tones here. I'm going to go in with more of a reddy. I'm actually just going to mix a bit of the sienna in with the colour I've got. So it's nice, it's not too bright. You might want a strong contrast, but you might not. So if you don't like a strong contrast, you can kind of just do what I've done and just make it a little bit lighter to start with. You can always build it up. So I am actually starting to bring in some of this shape on here, just to start with, because we have got some other tones in there as well. And then there are some of these ready tones that I'm seeing, but again, what you know, pop in what you're seeing. So I'm just kind of bringing in a few of the shapes I can see, just kind of dotting those in. And I'm going to, again, this sometimes works a bit back to front, but we've got some darker ones in there as well. So I'm just going to pop in some of those. If it's too dark, just add a bit of white or whatever. So we're kind of getting we know that, because our interpretation is just a representation of what we can see. So sometimes you only need a few dots and the brain will work that out for us. And then again, I quite like to get this kind of colouring on the head here. So I'm just going to go in with, I'm going to actually mix up a kind of a purpley tone there. So again, I've got a bit of a pinky, bit of this blue. Bit more purpley in there. Now, it sounds a strange thing, but this is where sometimes with colour, it's sometimes really good just to use your instinct as well. And I'm just going to try popping a tiny bit of brown in there because it's slightly warmer. So that's what I'm seeing anyway. So I'm just going to put a tiny bit of this ready brown in. And I'm happy with that actually. Maybe a bit more of the pink. It's amazing sometimes when you're using your intuition what actually comes out of that. Sometimes it's not what we want, and other times you think, yeah, actually, that's exactly what I was after. So I'm just going to pop in again some of the mottling on the head. I'm going to bring this head up as well. It needed to come over the green line. And I'm just going to kind of fill in these missing details, as it were. There you go. I might use that colour elsewhere, but we'll see. So we're just building up, building up, building up, and then we'll be able to put this white, you know, the white area of the bird on as well, the owl, where the lovely feathers are on the face. I'm just going to kind of fill in some of these lighter details here, which are a bit that kind of yellowy. So again, it's just, you may have a colour mixed up or not. Sometimes I end up with that with things like owls, when there's so many different variations. I sometimes just end up just kind of mixing extra little bits up because it's different in so many places. So just going to kind of come in here where I can see this lighter colour. In here. Just enjoy mottling on, you know, some of these lovely, lovely colours. Really pastely, aren't they, and fresh. I think you can't, there's nothing nicer than the colours that we see in nature, really. And observing them, we just think, oh wow, the combinations are fabulous. Okay, so again, you know, there are some slightly darker ones, so I'm just going to go in. I'm going to pop a little bit of like a brownie colour in there, but I'm just going to, what I would say, kind of knock the colour down at a tone so it's not so intense, because it's quite, you know, the feathers are quite layered, and just start to pop in some of these lovely colours on here within the pattern, what we think we can see. And then really just looking at getting that you know, really true white in there. So I'm going to go in with pure white now. Make sure my brush is clean though, so I don't and I want plenty because I want to kind of layer it up a little bit. So just decide where you're starting really. I'm going to let that dry a bit because it's a bit wet. So I'll start around this side. I'm going to go over, follow the line really that I've started. I think once we start doing this, this is when it starts to feel a little bit more like the owl's face. Like that. Now the bit at the bottom, you might want to hang on until we've got this darker area on, because we'll be able to see it then. So I might just go all the way around this side. And then around the other, just enjoy kind of just really getting into the zone with it. It's very enjoyable. And I will stop in a moment. See how everybody's getting on. Just enjoying building up those colours, exploring the shapes and the tones. So Yeah, we're getting there, aren't we? Just slowly but surely. There's some other little kind of dark shadows on there as well. Like, so you start to see, I think, more things as you go, really. Start to see, think, oh, actually, there's a little bit more of a darker colour there, or there's a little bit in here. I'm just gonna, add these kind of, that's where you get a bit more depth in that bit of the feather build up here, or there's a bit of a shadow under there, or so, you can start to pop in those other different areas. And then again, under here, what we're looking at is, this was the other element we were talking about, was actually looking at shadow and how we can use that. So that's quite dark in there. You look at the eyes. Do you want to go as dark under there or slightly lighter? And if you're not sure, start with something like a brown. You can pop a little bit of white in there, knock the colour back a bit, and then if you want to go darker, then by all means go darker. So I'm looking here before I overlay these. This is where you get this kind of big area of shadow underneath, don't you? Underneath the bird there. And that shows us how to separate, that we're separating separating out the feathers. And then again, have a little look round this other side. What colours have you got in there? Just mixing some kind of darks up there. What colour are these? Are they as dark as this one? But again, we need the different levels of shadow to be able to work out, the fact that the head's got some depth there underneath to it. So I'm bringing in that where I can see it. Just kind of, if we pop it in, just nice and carefully. And again, behind here, there might be some shadow kind of behind there. That helps kind of separate things out a little bit. And then again, what colour is that? Is it the purple again, or is it slightly darker? We've got all of these kind of variations of the feathering. That's quite helpful to have there because we're trying to build up. And again, we're directional. So this is the other side of it. Look at which way they're going. Look at which way, you need to kind of have them. There's some more down here. I'm going to use a similar tone actually, whilst I've got that in there. I'm just kind of copying really what I can see and dabbing it on. Use different brush strokes to help as well. I think that's more kind of bluey down here, but again, if you see anything in the similar colour to what you've got already, then just use that. I'm just going to build it up. And again, just kind of here we've got these darker colours, but I'll come back to those. I'm going to come back all the way up to here. Just kind of get these. Just nice and dark in there. And then I'm going to come back to this lovely feathered area here once that's dry enough. And then we can see then how that layers up because we've got the shadow underneath it. So we can start to pop that shape in there. And make it as deep as it needs to be as well. If it needs to be a bit deeper, you can by all means make that nice and deep. Starting to see, there's a lovely feathery effect there. Just keep building it up. Okay, well, I'm going to take a pause and see how everyone's getting on with that. It's just a lovely one to get sucked into. So just pause there. Okay, so we can just, like we were saying, continue to work down the owl, adding in little areas, as you're working, you probably start to see, oh, I need to move this in a little bit or shift that, and that's absolutely fine. That's what we tend to do anyway. It's a good way of working, rather than thinking it's set in stone, that's it, I can't move anything. We can move everything nowadays, which is, well, I think we should be encouraging one another just to move things as you go and not really, be too worried about that at all. Lovely. So, yeah, so it's just having a think about the different tones in here, and again, making sure we've got like the shadow in as well, deciding on the depth of the shadow, because that'll, sends where the wings and things are. And actually, I think that's the bit I'm going to pop in now. So start to look around here, although I've got bits to finish off and things like that. I'm just going to start to look in where else are these areas that are quite deep underneath. Usually, get those in place. So I'm just going to go in with a nice dark brown. Now, if it's not dark enough for you, you can always add some nice blue to that. And I'm, again, we're just looking, we're comparing which is the biggest area of depth here. So let's have a little look. These areas under the wings that are quite dark there. So I'm getting these areas of shadow in and nice and dark. And this actually looks almost as dark as the black, but it's not. It's brown and blue mixed together. So you can get quite an effective darker colour without it making things too flat. Sometimes if we go in with black with everything, it just flattens it down a bit too much. So I'm just kind of just popping in, where I can see the shadow under the wing. And actually, we've said this before, it's like it's reverse, it's reverse shadow. So by putting the shadows in place, we get the shape. It's a fabulous way of doing things sometimes. Sometimes people find it difficult when there's a lot going on there, maybe not with the feathers, but with other topics. Where do I start? There's so much of something. If you start with those shadows, it creates the shape for you, which is lovely. So we're just looking in here within this feather, and this will feel very harsh when we start to put the shadows in first, but then we soften it down with the warms and the other tones and things like that as well. I'm consequently bringing this wing out a little bit because I've just realised it's not quite in the right place, and that's just popping that in there. Yeah, pop those in. So again, I'm just looking at these, these dark areas, getting those into place. So we've got the shadow under here, underneath where these wing feathers here are here, and quite a bit dark shadow here. So we're just starting to pick those out, and that really helps us with then, creating the other colours that layer up over the top of that as well. And then we've got this shadow. I'm actually just going to add a touch of white to this. Just make it just slightly lighter, because this is the shadow on the fur, on the white fur. It isn't quite as dark as the shadow within the wings itself. So I'm just going to pop this. Kind of follows, doesn't it? Follows the shape of the wing line sometimes on the fur, like feathers. I keep saying fur, it's not. So we're just looking, and again down the other side. It's good, isn't it, to look at these. And again, we can look at the darkest ones. Get those into place. Now all of that kind of comes together to bring all of these different elements, but don't be too startled by how sharp it looks, because we'll soften. As I said, that's why we tend to, we can get those shadows in earlier. It tends to really help with putting, it actually, we soften it down by putting the other colours over the top. If we do it last, then it does flatten the whole, sometimes flattens the whole thing. All of those colours we're putting underneath just flattens it. So if we can get the dark shadows in first, it really helps keep everything feeling, quite rounded and helps there. And then again, I'm just flipping it over so it's not quite as harsh a colour, where we get these shadows here. And it's just working out the difference, which shadow do we want? Do we want a really dark one, or do we want one that's still a shadow, but it's just slightly lighter on the fur, feathers? I keep saying fur. We can see some other ones. So I'm getting those into place just to think about it. The darker ones really, and then we can even go even lighter with the shadows as well, with some of the tones in there. But it's really good practice just to really start to look at the difference between them. And then of course down here, look how dark that is in there. That's really dark, isn't it? So you can even get those in if you want to do that. I might go even darker with those ones. There, put this side as well. Really interesting when you start looking at it. And then a little bit down here as well, kind of between the foot and this corner. So, just these shadows alone really starts to create, the outline of the bird without even trying, in quite a natural way. I'm just kind of dotting in darkest area here between where the owl's foot appears to be, and then it gets a bit lighter. So I'm just going in a bit more lightly as we go up. And again, we can start to pop in some of these shapes that then create the shape of the body in the owl. And just keep building it up, and it's great just to try. So again, now I'm starting to look at some of these cooler tones in here. Some you might think, oh well, that feels a bit blue based, different to what I've used already, and then you just mix up a new colour. Oops. Make sure that if you're switching between the two though, that your brushes are nice and clean, because you don't want to lose that lovely tones that you've got so far. Easy done, just with a bit of the wrong, a darker tone on there. Or a blue tone when you're wanting a warm one. what colour this one is. That's kind of a purpley tone. Sometimes we just have to, becomes like a memory muscle though when you're mixing these colours. If you're remixing up ones, you know, new ones, eventually it does stick and you just know what to put with what. We've had some of these lovely pastel tones as well in the last couple of weeks actually, this week and last. So we'll start to, although they're on a different, they're different because one was in the snow, wasn't it? And then one is on an owl. There's similarities between them. Again, I'm starting to pop in some of these shapes, some of these tones that I can see in here. You know, and then again, directional, there's lovely directional movement with the feathers as well. And we've got these, you know, some of them are more shady, some of them are brighter, and we can add the really bright ones, can't we? So yeah, so it's creating the shape of the feathers around the chest area as well, and the neck in between. Gives us that lovely feel that, you know, the feathers are 3D and you get that rounded shape in there as well. And then we look at some of the ones in here. So we just keep going, and then obviously we'll need to put some of the warmth through there as well, just to make sure that, you know, the cool colours do tend to kind of go backwards a little bit, recede. We just need to pop a little bit of warmth on some of them to make sure that we've got them coming forward a little bit. And the light colour will help with that as well. And just keep putting them through those little tones that's slightly different. And now it'll be becoming second nature to you now. Just so used to seeing it, whereas at the beginning it's like, oh my gosh, there's a lot going on there. Now you can just see it all the time, which is great. So I'm just even down the feet here, looking at the difference in the tone. Sometimes you get a direct shape look with it. Again, just observing, do you need to make any of it slightly darker? This one here is a bit darker, I feel. That's what I'm seeing anyway, but obviously we all see things differently. I'm just mixing up, just keep mixing up colours we think we can see there. There's a bit darker here, so gone in with a bit more of a bluey tone here. But again, we're just making those decisions all the time, just based on what we're observing. And this blue feels blue. Other people might see it as a different colour, and that's absolutely fine. Just seeing what you can see. Keep rubbing that on. There we go. Again, we're just picking out all the little bits that we think, oh, I can see that now. I didn't see that before. And they just start appearing, actually, some of the things in here. The shapes and things. Right, so down this kind of body, you know, where we get the shadow, obviously that creates some of that depth of shade. But then we need to kind of balance that with making sure we're getting some nice bright light bits in or some warmer bits. So on the like on the just on the bird's chest here, it feels a little bit warmer. So I'm going to make sure that brush is really well cleaned. And I may go in, I'm just seeing if that's the very brightest first, because this is very bright. It's not quite. We've got spots of bright, but I'd say around some of the chest, it's a bit more yellowy, a bit warmer. I'm just going to pop in a bit of warmth just to make it come forwards a bit. So I'm just going to put a bit of a tint with yellow in. I'm not going to go too yellow because it's still very light, isn't it? I'm going to start popping that on quite thickly, getting some of the texture of the painting. But that's choice, you don't have to do that at all. Let's try that colour. Yeah. So I can really start to kind of make those thicker feathers in here as well, just by using a few brush strokes that feel like we can see them coming through the other colours, and that's great because we've got the other colours underneath. It helps us to see, you know, these lovely feather shapes that we're making here. You might have some others to put back in there as well from another area. And then we're looking where else, is there any warmth anywhere else in here? A little bit here maybe. Just picking the areas out. That's all we can do, is just keep looking, seeing what you can see. I never see everything the first time. It's the more we look. This was very soft, downy fur, isn't it? So you can almost kind of just really lightly kind of get some texture in there. And then I'm going to go in on this area here now, finish off with the very lightest bits in the middle before I do the wings on the side. So this is where we go in with these bright white colours, where there's just the odd, you know, tip of bright colour like this here, like the feathers on the face, which I'm actually just going to go over again actually and pop in a bit more. And this is where we're going in with the pure white, so it's really, it'll pop a bit more, a bit of a feather here, which are catching the light. And then again, wherever you think you can see it, so I'm looking, just a couple. Areas. Where it feels a little bit brighter than the rest. Maybe there's a couple on this feathers here. And then certainly on the feet there, look, getting this really bright feathery area on the foot. And then on the bottom. And then on the other side there as well. Maybe a bit, you know, just the odd bit. So just keep, you know, having a little look where you can see it. I think it's the using it sparingly that really helps make that contrast, and it really does then stand out. It's a little bit difficult to see on the camera sometimes when it's wet, so it'll be more apparent when it's dry because it catches the light a little bit when it's wet. And then we've got thinking about you know, the winged areas as well now, and all these lovely patterns. So again, you know, it's just remembering, don't feel overwhelmed by it. Just break each section down and have a look at the main colour underneath. So like at the top, I went for that purpley one and broke it with mottling and do that. You know, where it's like this, where you've got two colours, it's kind of browny, and then there's the reddy colour, the kind of burnt sienna colour, Venetian red, or even ochre. You could do a bit of yellow ochre in that as well. Then you just pop those over the top if they go over the top of the dark. So I would be inclined to kind of go in with a dark colour underneath there. And it's a bit, the fur is a bit downy, isn't it? So I'm going to go in with some brown, dark brown. I'm going to go in with a tiny bit of this yellow and white mixture. So it feels not as harsh. There we go. So you can even go in with purple colour if you want, actually. It's whatever colour you want. You could go in with a bit of blue in there as well. I want to go in with that browny colour there. Can always darken it. I'll just get a tab of blue so it runs out. A bit. Right, so yeah, so here where we've got an overlap, just kind of dab it on really. Try not to make it quite as dark. Just need to lighten it up slightly. Not quite as dark as the shadow. So we still need that to kind of show the shadow in between. I'm going to put some of those other dark colours in there at the end of the feathers. And then that's the dark one, but then there's a bit of a shading on them there. We're just observing what we can see. I've missed a dark shadow there actually, but there's a bit of brown coming over here, so I'll put those in. What else have we got? We've got anywhere similar. This is a little bit not quite as dark, is it there? Although some of the shadows under here are darker there. So this bit. Right, so then it's thinking, okay, what colours do I need to overlay? So we've got all those lovely reds and things like that to experiment with and explore. I'll move my paper down a bit. So you can test just at the side to see if it's the right colour for you, or whether you want to. You can make that less bright with a bit of yellow. If you want to. Or a tiny bit of white in there. I'm just going to go in with what I've kind of got here. And then I'm just looking at these colours that I've popped in there. And I'm just going to gently pull it over rather than, or you can even dab it on, you can even dot it on. You want that kind of downy effect there. Just pulling down there. I might actually make that bit more yellowy based on this edge because there's a bit of kind of a quite a yellowy ochre colour. So if you haven't got yellow ochre, as I said, you can use a bit of this red here and a bit of yellow, or you can even use a bit of yellow and a bit of brown and a bit of white. It's all sorts of ways of getting there. So it's a little bit more, just a bit more downy in there. A few little bits on here as well, so I'm just going to pop that on. There's a few bits over this side, so it's just picking out, you know, if you can use the puller, it's quite helpful. It does sometimes occur, obviously, with the symmetry of the feathers and everything like that. You do get it appearing in different places. Like that. And I might be just having a little look where else I can see it. So there's a little bit on the top of here, isn't there? But again, you know, I'm going to just dull that down slightly with a bit of white. It takes the colour out of it when you add the white, so it's not quite as intense. When you see it over the white feathers, it is a bit cooler as opposed to a lot of darker feathers here. So just going to have a little look at how I can just pull that through a little bit over the top, create that kind of little downy effect there that we've got. And again, you know, if you're seeing that colour occurring, like there might be some a little bit up, I can see a bit up here. Pop that bit back in just to balance it out a little bit, and a bit up here as well. I've lost that colouring actually at the top there. Do a little bit of a darker brown in there as well to pop back in. But yeah, so it's fascinating, isn't it, to work through what we can see in there. And then again, you know, just having a little look, what else do we need to pop on? Kind of almost before I put those top layers on, I'm trying to find the bottom layer. So I'm going to go in with the purpley colour again there, which was the blue. The pink. And it's got a little bit of a brown tinge. That's what I'm seeing anyway, as well here. It's a bit like that top one. I think I did put a tiny bit of this reddy brown in, didn't I? More pink. A bit of this back in. And I need a bit more of the pink in there. It's just nice, isn't it, how we start to kind of make all of these decisions just with more kind of trying things out. That's a bit better. lost all of its colour. I'm gonna pop a tiny bit of this brown in it. The brown was a bit too bright. So where I want it, that's a bit better. There we go. So it's the dark brown I wanted, not the reddy brown. That kind of pulls the colour down a little bit, so it's more like this. And then popping this on the wing. So there are different things going on here. So I'm just going to kind of dot it on. I'm not too worried about having a little bit of anything coming through because we have got some like little white mottly bits on there as well. So you can just think about how that works actually, and just use it to your advantage when you're filling in little gaps and things, especially when you've got these downy feathers, because they are really soft, and sometimes that kind of velvety texture is nice when you kind of just dab things on. With a little bit around this bit of the bird here as well, so pop a little bit on here. I'll pop the white colours on top of it. So it's quite a colourful bird at the moment. So just popping those brown bits over the top. You get these like little brown circles, don't you, that look gorgeous, and then little white circles in it inside. So again, it doesn't need to be perfect because nature kind of dabs, they are kind of a bit sporadic on there. So I'm just going to pop on the dark ones, and then when they're dry, I'll just pop a little centre in it. So I'm just kind of positioning them hereabouts. The brain does work out, as I said before, it works out how these things go in. And I may just put a bit of the purple bit on there. Right, so at the moment, obviously, it looks a little bit blobby, like it's got these big blobs on. But don't worry, that we'll soften that down when we put some of the white in it when it's dried a bit. And really just tiny, just a tiny bit. They're not perfect circles either, so you can even, it doesn't matter if it's on the end of the brown area. Because as I said, the eye knows this about the owl and works it out for us really. So putting some lighter bits on top now. Wherever you've got some kind of lighter areas on the wing as well. So we're starting to soften it down now, again, by popping into some of these little areas. Now, maybe you've got highlights on the feathers, on these orange bits. So what you can do with as a highlight, rather than putting white in there, you could just go in with a slightly lighter little tint. I've just got yellow and white actually. Sometimes that's kind of just a bit of a contrast, but it just picks out, some of these little feathers that are coming over without, being too drastic with a very bright white. Kind of just dot some of these on over here as well. And then, again, down here, a bit whiter. So we're going in now with the light colours. This is quite a bright colour there, so you can just pick out a couple of areas where, where it's definitely lighter, where we have here, haven't we? Got this bit of the wing, for example, there. A little bit at the back here as well on this one. And so we've got this front central wing here is really quite bright there. Then it kind of goes a bit more dull there. And kind of bring in some of the colours around that as well. Just so that we've got some of it there. Again, we're just kind of working in some of the ones we haven't got, so we know that's not really bright in there. It's just working out what colour to put in. And then, any other shadows we've missed between this one here. Now, if you've still got areas and they feel too solid, again, we'll just soften them down again with a bit more paint. You can just kind of go right down that edge, just with more kind of warm paint. any light brighter areas. This is quite dark, but actually it is quite dark, isn't it? But I suppose we can, pop a little, maybe just soften the edge down a little bit with just another colour paint or something like that. You could go back in with your, go into your background a little bit, and if it feels too thick, just put a little bit more of your green colour on or whatever you've used. So we're kind of getting there now, really. I'm not going to do too much. I'm just going to have a little look at the balance. So, is there anything else I've missed? Do I need any other bright colours? Have I got my whites in the right place? One there. No. So I'm looking at balance across the bird, really. Maybe something here a bit brighter. So we're just picking out those key things, really, when we're doing it. That a bit more white on here. Just in there, but yeah, so just keep going. And actually, a really good thing as well is just make sure you can have a little look from a distance if you hold your work from a distance as well, because there is a lot of texture. So sometimes it feels really intense, and then you step away from it and it's like, wow, the difference is, it does make a difference. And then you can look at it as well when you've done your piece. Look at it the next day. So really, we've just got the texture of this stone. So again, I would go in with one colour. And then we can change, put some darks and things in there as well. I've got a bit of green, a bit of brown. I'll just actually take a pause. So you can just kind of finish off this plinth by just deciding on what tone you want to pop in first. You can put a darker one or a lighter one. I'm just going to go in with this kind of similar mossy green, and I'll change it up as I go. I'm just going to kind of give it a good covering and working whilst it's damp, just some of the darker areas. And then working just some of these kind of nice little mossy textures. Like that. And then any kind of lighter areas that you've got that you just want to, where you get this kind of like lichen, don't you? It's quite nice there. I'm just going to pop a few of those, bit nice and loose, but I'm just going to go in a little bit darker with some of those. Put the edges back in there. There we go. And then if you want to kind of pop these, this foliage, then you can do that. I can do that really quite quickly though, because I'm aware this kind of video has gone on quite a long time. And I'm going to find where, I'm not going to put loads in either. I just want a couple because I really like want the owl to kind of sing on this. Just put a few of these thin branches just on the tip of the brush, coming down there. I'll just do two for the moment, I think. And then Just some of them have got a few branches coming off. Just a few, keep nice and light, because obviously this is a little bit out of focus as well. And then just going in with a bit of quite bright green in there actually compared to the background. So I'm going to get my green and some yellow, add a yellow to it, will brighten it right up. Okay, we're going with that. I'm just kind of going to, actually some of them are light, some of them are bright, and some of them are not. So I'm just going to go in, kind of create, just press down some kind of leafy shapes here. Where the bright ones are, you can just press down your get, you know, is it on it, if it's on its side or if it's coming backwards. Just gonna get those in there. Not too bright those, are they, actually, when I'm looking? Probably can't see them on the camera. Brighten those up a little bit. Or actually use a different green, might be a good idea. There we go. And then a darker one. With a few darker greens in there. So, yeah, and I'm going to mix a couple of colours together. And then just kind of get those shapes put on. So this is how I'm keeping it really loose. We're just creating the shape of the leaves backwards or forwards here. There we go. And then the berries. So I'm going to do the same with the berries. So I've got pinky red. So get some red on here. And I'm going to get some pink on there as well. You could just go in. You could just go in with like a magenta, a warmer purpley colour. I'm just mixing two together, a red and a pinky colour. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to kind of make the shape like that. If it's too pink, you can just put a bit of yellow in. That'll make it a bit more, just slightly more peachy. If that makes sense. I'll just go back over that now. See what I mean? Got some down here. So, I mean, you can actually place these as well. I kind of place some where I like sometimes. There we go. And then I'm just going to go in with a light colour. You could go in with a bit of yellow if you wanted, and just kind of put where the highlight is. But again, I'm just gently kind of squashing it down really, rather than, you know, really going in the detail, because we want this to be quite kind of loose. It's a little bit out of focus. Same with the whites. There's also a few little bits of white in, but rather than doing a very neat dot again, I'm just going to kind of pop it in there, keep it a bit out of focus so it's not like a perfect, you can make it a bit wetter as well, and then it'll spread a little bit. So we've got a hint that that these berries are there, but also they've got a soft focus on them. And that's it really. I think the only thing I would do actually, but I'm not going to do it tonight, is sleep on it and then I'll come back and actually darken off some of this background because it's too light for me. I like it a little bit darker, but that's fine. These are decisions we make all the time about things. But I hope you enjoyed that. There's lots of helpful things to think about. I might actually change his eyes in the morning a little bit as well, just change that shape slightly, and bring them up a little bit, but I'm going to leave it for tonight. Always leave it if in doubt. All right, well, thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed that. See you soon. Bye.